Nerd Junior. Hey guys, and welcome back to Nerd Junior. Today I will be starting a new series on the channel where I'll be looking at every popular arcade game before the year 2000. And these will consist of like the most popular ones, like for example Donkey Kong, Centipede, stuff like that. Not all of them, because if I did that, it'd probably take me a year worth of videos when it takes me about a week to make these. So, yeah. So today we are going to be starting with a game known as Computer Space, and although it is not technically the first game, it is actually a derivative of what is essentially the first game called Spacewar, a game that came out in 1962. It is pretty much the first commercially successful and widely available game to pretty much come out. And I will be running through the mechanics, some background information on it, and the process, and some parts of the process of its creation. I would like to say that the footage I'm using for this video is not mine. It is from another channel who I will leave the link to, and I will also leave a link to the original video as well, as I have trimmed this video down and I've reused it for as long as I make this footage. So let's just basically start what this game is. So Computer Space was released in 1971 and it was created by Nolan Bushell and Ted Dabney, who were in partnership with Syzygy Engineering. And like I said earlier, it was the first widely available and commercially successful video game, with it selling over 1,000 cabinets by mid-1972, which is big for that year, and ultimately it sold about 1,500 units. But in spite of this, it was not exactly the biggest success that was hoped for, but it was still successful nonetheless. And like most arcade games, it spawned many clones. Well, not many in this case, thank God. But funnily enough, one of its clones was Star Trek, which came out in 1972. Ironic that it was 6 years after the thing came out. And another clone, which was literally the 2-player version of it, but I'm sure you see how that works. And so by the and let's give you a rundown of what games looked like in the 70s. Video games at this time weren't as popular as they are now. They didn't have their own award system. They didn't have their own systems. They didn't have any of that. They were pretty much considered novelties and were treated as such, with them only really being used by programmers and technicians that had access to computers, which was rare at that time. And these were at primarily research institutions and some large companies, but that's pretty much what it looked like for games in the 70s. They weren't as respected as they are now. And since I touched on or talked about it a little earlier, the game that this is actually derived from, Spacewar, was pretty much, again, the first video game created. It was created in 1962 for the Digital Equipment Corporation by a man named Steve Russell. And fun fact, it even had members of the programming community at MIT that helped with it. This game it's about as simple space game as you could get. two-dimensional planes, dogfight between two spaceships, a starfield two-dimensional background, and it was, again, since video games weren't respected around this time, it was really only passed around in the small programming community. And since computers weren't as widely available, it was necessarily small. And it was also widely recreated on other mini computer and mainframe systems of the time. And it even eventually went on to microcomputer systems. But now with that all out of the way, let's explain the mechanics of computer space a little bit. And there are two different versions of this that I will cover. It's the single player and the two-player version. I personally have not played this game. In fact, again, this footage is not mine, but it looks cool. Anyway, so as you can see by the footage, the player controls a rocket. Yeah, you can tell this is a basic space game in the 70s. And you shoot against a pair of flying saucers. Again, basic space game in the 70s. And it is set against the backdrop of a starfield, like it's like one of the next big space games, Asteroids, and everyone's played that. And interestingly enough, I would, in some way or another, in some weird way, I would consider this game a prototype to Galaxian, because it has pretty much the same firing system as Galaxian. You know, one at a time. One at a time. A cooldown between shots. You know, emphasis on timing, like Galaxian. Unlike its sister cabinet, Galaga, best game ever made, by the way. Yeah, best game ever made. And also, and it also pretty much is a prototype of Defender and even Asteroids, because it features a hyperspace feature, and as you'd expect, it's black and white inverted colors, and another round begins if you successfully perform a hyperspace maneuver. And you know, this game, I'm not sure if it has a definitive end. I mean, a lot of arcade games do because of their, size, their storage size, like Pac-Man, for example. But, the game continues nonetheless. One round costs a quarter, like most arcade games. Not modern arcade games. Not modern arcade games. And 2 quarters if the machine, and the 2 quarters thing is essentially a way of saying, hey, let's make making money cheaper for us, because it has to be adjusted against the instruction manual's recommendations for, reasonable pricing. But these are quarters in the 70s, so you can see where this is kind of going here. And now on to the 2-player version of the game. So I'm sure you can put the pieces together yourself, but it's basically 1-against-1 spaceship battles. But this does require a modified control panel, and which a lot of 2-player games would have. And it's 2 sets of controls and a couple of joysticks, which replace the movement buttons. And that is the gameplay. There's not really much to it. It's one of the most bare bones game, but I can excuse this because it's literally 1971, and this is like the pinnacle of video games right here. So, well, not the pinnacle, but the beginning. All right, now let's get on to some of the technical aspects. technical aspects of this game, which there are a lot. So, unlike its brethren, Spacewar, or maybe not, the final design for Computer Space actually, and I was surprised to learn this, uses no microprocessor. The entire computer system is a machine consisting of 74 series integrated circuits, and it has graphic elements held in diode arrays. These arrays, which Bushnell designed to let him rotate the rocket, actually let him rotate it in 16 directions with only 4 arrays. And these ships that you see on screen are pretty much considered early concept of sprite graphics. Sprites are essentially like real life drawn or real life people animated into a arcade, video game, cartoon, whatever you want to use their style. An example of this would be Mortal Kombat, but this is essentially the first part of it. And these ships were pretty much just drawn as a pattern of dots, and they weren't interconnected, so they were pretty much bitmaps. And that is one, and yeah. So that is my explanation of Computer Space, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this. If you would like to read more on the 74 series integrated circuits, and even what Sprite graphics are, you can. I'll leave a couple of articles down in the description. My review of this game, it's okay. I mean, it's certainly not the best thing out there. I mean, if I had to, I'd pick any other game over this. But I'm sure at the time that this was released, it was very impressive, and it was, because this game essentially started the golden age of video games, and it ended the primitive timeline of video games, which were, as it implies, quite primitive. And it ultimately started the commercial video game industry. The games that came after it were Pong, and eventually Syzygy was incorporated into what we know now as Atari, which went on to make Centipede, Centipede and Pong, which are phenomenal games inside themselves. So, sometimes the first is never the best, but it's definitely the most important, is what you could say. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this video. I will be releasing my I will be releasing my next episode shortly, and we will continue this series for at least 14 episodes. It goes from Computer Space to Mortal Kombat, the first one, not the 3D era, but definitely not that. But all right, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I will see you later.